deeply.
In about 4 seconds, a teacher will begin to speak.
Okay guys, I had a couple of requests on how I set up a tank for some of the smaller species of wild type bettas. So let's go with Betta chinoides complex, the Coxina complex. This would work really well with the Betta splendens complex. But this is one of my favorite ways to set up these type of bettas. And as you know, in most of my videos, I typically keep the tanks anywhere between a half to 3/4 full. So this is basically a Betta chinoide and Betta hendra dual species setup. I mentioned this in plenty of videos in the past. We won't talk about the fish. We're going to talk about what I use in the setup, how I filtrate, the lighting, the method behind it, and some of my process. So let's go with substrate. So in a tank like this, I typically would not use any substrate at all. I will paint the bottom and the back portion of the tank either a dark color or maybe even a terracotta color. I've used terracotta before. Like the color itself. It does let all the oranges and browns pop a little better. Black does that also, probably more than the terracotta, I should say. But there's something about the terracotta color that just makes a system like this really pop. But let's get to the other portions of it. The botanicals I typically use are magnolia leaves, Indian almond leaves, and a lot of different pods, driftwoods, roots, occasionally a clay pot for a bubble nest builder. I just recently received some of these monkey pods that I started to soak them, and they throw a lot of nice color and add sort of a more, I wouldn't say naturalistic appearance to an Indonesian or Malaysian type betta setup, but they add a little nook and cranny for fish like Betta chinoides and Betta hendra to actually take some refuge. But the other thing about them I've noticed is they throw a lot of nice tannins. Now I picked up these pods from Untitled Aquatics years ago, and I have a container full of different pods and different botanicals I haven't used yet, and I'm starting to pull out pretty much out of the archives and set up. So like I mentioned, I won't use a substrate in a tank like this. Savu pods are very good hides for Betta chinoides, and all the fish pretty much in the Coxina complex will use them, including Betta hendra. A lot of the driftwood in this tank is Malaysian driftwood. Some wood I actually collected on hikes in New Jersey that was considered to be bogwood. I found the wood in the water, and I soaked it after some time and used it. I've used plenty of it in other tanks. I never have any issues, no contaminants, and the fish usually show pretty well. Let's not forget, a lot of these fish that we're talking about are not collected in pristine water environments. A lot of these fish are found in ditches. Some of these fish are found in running water. So there's a lot of different environments these fish do adapt to. They don't necessarily love fast flowing streams. That's not what they're built for. But a lot of these fish live in water that is considered to be pretty much less pristine. I mean, the water quality itself may not be negative, and there may not be high TDS, but for the most part, the water will always be murky and never crystal clear. This tank is a little clearer than I would prefer it, but in due time, those monkey pods I talked about will throw a lot of nice tannin to brown the water up a little bit. That type of water will always show Betta chinoides and Betta hendra to their best ability. You'll see the best colors in fish like that. Betta splendens will show well. Other fish in the Coxina complex will show well. Betta unimaculata complex will always show well in water that has some tannins. But let's not also forget, a lot of these fish are also found in clear water. The water may not always be tannin stained. My recreation of this particular setup was to set up a tank that would be close to a peat swamp, void of plants, where the pH is extremely low, and most of the fish in the tank in this type of setup are going to be basically wild bettas, air breathing in a low oxygen environment. I keep a very tight lid on a tank like this, well sealed. You can see the trim back there. Very little gaps. Number one reason, it will not allow any of these fish to leap, jump, and find a way out. Sometimes I even tape the backs to even make sure they're even more sealed. This tank creates a nice lock and seal, and it traps in that awesome humid layer. That humid layer is a warm layer of air that will allow these fish to go up and take a nice gulp of humid air that's not significantly different than the water they're living in. The water in this tank is 73 degrees. The air temperature is pretty much the same, if not a tad bit warmer, because of the incandescent style light bulb I'm using. A system like this typically doesn't require a whole lot of maintenance. Water changes are done once a week, once every 2 weeks, somewhere close to 15 to 20%. Very rarely will I change more than 25% of the water. This is a tank that is considered to be pretty low maintenance, and probably the best way, in my opinion, to display this type of fish. Would you keep smaller type rasboras as either dither fish or more as a companion species for wild bettas? Absolutely. Fish like Sundadanio axelrodi, maybe even some of the meteor minnows that are the smaller version of the mountain minnow would do well in a tank like this. The temperatures are conducive to keeping species like that. You never really want to go way above 78 degrees for these type of fish. Occasionally the waterways that they live in will get higher than that, but only on short occasions. They don't live in environments where the temperatures are extremely high. Contrary to most belief, wild bettas do a lot better in low 70s. I keep a lot of fish in tanks without heaters. I just maintain the room temperature and they do pretty well. So this is a tank that I've talked about for years. One of my favorite ways to set up these type of fish. So I hope I pretty much shine some light on that. Betta chinoides, Betta hendra, mixed species setup. Wild betta fish, USA. Thanks, guys.
So you're a philosopher?
Yes. 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 Yes.